A very good morning to you all. With great pleasure, I would like to welcome the guest speaker of the session, Professor Priyan Pereira, and all the presenters to the 26th International Forestry and Environment Symposium 2022. We are at Hall A for the session, Biodiversity Conservation and Management, Sustainable Tourism. This session will be chaired by Professor Priyan Pereira from the Department of Forestry and Environmental Sciences, University of Sri Jayewardenepura. With over 15 years of experience in research, teaching, extension, and outreach in the fields of environmental management and forestry, Professor Priyan Pereira received his PhD and master's degrees in forestry and environmental management from the Louisiana State University, USA. Further, Professor Priyan Pereira is a pioneer in the conservation of Indian pangolin in the South Asian region. Professor Priyan Pereira's specialized research interests include recreation ecology, ecotourism, biodiversity, wildlife, sustainable certification, and forest certification. So now, with great respect, I would like to invite Professor Priyan Pereira to chair this session. Over to you, sir.
Thank you for that introduction. First, on behalf of the Symposium Organizing Committee, I welcome all the speakers to this first session on biodiversity conservation and management and sustainable tourism. So for this session, I think we have 9 presentations lined up, and I believe all the presenters are already in the meeting. So I think the guidelines have been given to you prior to this session. Each presenter will have about 10 minutes, and then we can have a couple of minutes for question and answers. So I kindly request our authors to stick to the time limits so that we can get through this session on time. So without further delay, then I think we can move on to the first presentation. It will be done by Dhananjani, MDT Dhananjani, and the presentation title is The Impact of Recreational Trails on the Diversity of Theropod Vertebrates within Northern Plains National Park. I think Dhananjani is here, so over to you.
Present on the impact of recreational trails on the diversity of tetrapods within the Horton Place National Park. Introduction. Sri Lanka is an island. It is considered as a global hotspot for biological diversity. High level of protection is provided for wildlife and habitat that are within the national park. National parks are the protected areas which permit recreational activities. Therefore, despite the economic gains obtained, a number of negative impacts may arise due to heavy visitor arrivals. Ecotourism includes a portion of protected area visitation. One of the best examples is trail use. The trail is not only given to allow protected area facilities and facilitate recreational opportunities, but also access to protect natural resources by focusing visitor use. And when considering trail construction, often cause habitat loss, alters vegetation, and alters water balance and increase habitat fragmentation. Recreational trail destroy the continuation and prevalence of grassland and forest. Because of there is a evidence that recreational trails can change species diversity in both grassland and forest ecosystem. And when there is a presence of trails in the park, it can be observed that animals are approached for observation and identification. Disturbance by recreational activities can have a major impact on flora and fauna at individual, population, community level in short term and long term. Some anthropogenic disturbances were occurred by visitors. Roadkill, animal feeding, nature weaving, anthropogenic noise likewise. The study was conducted in Horton Plains National Park. Because of most popular viewing point of people in HPNP are Red Bridge, Chimney Pool, Baker's Fall and World's End. Research gap in Sri Lanka, few have been done. Anyway, with the long-term recreation activity have been concentrated on recreational trail within the HPNP through process of ecotourism activities. Therefore, present study was conducted focusing on impact of recreational trail on tetrapod within the HPNP. This is my objective, to determine the impact of recreational trail on the diversity of tetrapod in selected habitat within the HPNP. This is my study site. These are habitats which I selected to conduct my research: cloud forest, grassland, aquatic habitat. And materials and method. Tetrapod were surveyed using line transit method, and tetrapod were examined along trail transit and control transit. Control transit were established to examine species composition where no trail existed. And control transit were monitored 200 meters away from trails. And each transit was 100 meters in length, and width of transit line was different according to the tetrapod vertebrate category that was examined. So you can see in this slide. The study was conducted in these time periods, so morning, midday and evening. Data analysis. Species diversity index was calculated using Shannon-Wiener diversity index. The Hutchinson t-test was used to compare the Shannon diversity index between control and trail transit. And results and discussion. Highest species diversity index was recorded along control transit, and the only significant difference in diversity index was recorded for the bird. And species diversity of amphibians was higher in aquatic habitat as expected. The diversity indices of both amphibians and birds were significantly different between control and trail transits. And you can see no amphibians were recorded in grassland. So the grassland are generally a less suitable habitat for amphibians. And you can see red circle. Diversity index for reptiles along trail transit were higher than the control transit. Regarding this incident, I will explain later. And according to Mann-Whitney U-test comparison results, so you can see only these two species were significantly higher among the record amphibians in the undisturbed habitat. And when we consider about the reptiles, rhino, horned lizard and common rough snake were recorded in significant higher numbers from control transit, but the number of black-lipped lizard were higher along the trail transit because they display high frequency of basking and digging behavior in the edge of trails. And when we consider about the bird, these species that were not significantly different in average number, but in most cases, number of individual of birds were higher along the control transit than trail transit. And when we consider about mammals, these three species were the only mammal species that show a significant difference. Therefore, the number of mammal species was negatively affected by the presence of trails. And some disturbances were recorded. You can see road kills, photography, and trampling likewise. Therefore, we have to more focus on the impact of recreational trail within the HPNP. And conclusion, most of the tetrapod species were more abundant away from the nature trails, and the presence of recreational trail within the HPNP has negatively affected the species diversity as well as species abundance near the area of those construction. And we have to give some management implication. Visitor guidance is an effective conservation measure to reduce the negative impacts. An awareness poster should be displayed regarding of reducing noise level and photography approaching the animal identification likewise. In addition, prevents of the trail construction in undeveloped natural habitat would reduce human access and disturbance most efficiently. Acknowledgement. I highly appreciate the support received from the staff of Horton Place National Park and Department of Wildlife Conservation for granting permission to conduct this research. Finally, I would like to express my warm gratitude to the University of Sri Jayawardhanapura and Department of Zoology. Thank you.
Thank you, Dhananjani, for that nice presentation. So I would now the topic is open for discussion. If the audience have any questions, you can direct them. Any questions? Yeah, I think yeah. Yes, Dhananjani, I think I have one question for you. Now you have compared the faunal abundance and diversity between controlled transit and the road, right?
Trail transit, sir.
Trails, yes. Now some species actually prefer edge habitats.
Yes, sir.
While some prefer interior habitats. So how can you say that so naturally some abundance of some species could be high along the trail, especially the species that prefer edge habitats.
Yes.
So how can you say that it is the variation or the difference in abundance is due to the recreational activities?
Sir, this regarding this incident, especially when considering reptiles, Calotis nigrilavis was more abundant. I mean, it preferred habitat associated near the trail because of availability lane area near the nature trails.
Yes, so that means even though there are recreational activities, people are using the trail, they still prefer those habitats, right?
Yes, sir.
Yes, so how can you say the difference in abundance is due to the recreational activities? Because some species naturally prefer edge habitats, while others prefer interior habitats.
Yes, sir. I observe some animals display like attraction behavior when presence of human, they do not display avoid behavior, because of they display tolerate behavior and attraction behavior, sir.
Yeah, so that's my question as well, because you have concluded that the difference in abundance is due to recreational activities. But what I'm saying is some species naturally select edge habitats or open habitats. So if you have compared the abundance of species that prefer edge habitats and the same abundance of the same species in the interior habitat, obviously you will your outcome will be a high abundance of that species along the trail. So I think that's one of the major concerns. Anyway, I think you can maybe improve on these aspects. Maybe you have the data to analyze and come up with more credible conclusions. So any other questions for Dhananjani? Yeah, right. I think since there are no other questions from the audience, we can move on to the next presentation. So thank you once again, Ms. Dhananjani, for your presentation.
Thank you, sir.
Right. So the next presentation is on special resource partitioning exhibited by the endemic agamid species within selected forest habitats of Singharaja Forest Reserve. So this will be done by, the presentation will be done by B.N. Mendis. So over to you, Ms. Mendis. Yes.
Greetings, everyone. My name is Vinuri Mendis, and we are from the Department of Zoology of the University of Sri Jayawardenepura. And I'm here to present to you about our research on spatial resource partitioning exhibited by endemic agamid species within selected forest habitats of Singharaja Forest Reserve. First, let me drive you through a brief introduction to our study. Sri Lanka, along with the Western Ghats of India, is considered as a biodiversity hotspot enriched with high species diversity and endemism. Our island is known as a herpetofaunal paradise, with species belonging to 3 reptilian orders. In the order Squamata, suborder Lacertidia, there are 22 agamid lizard species, out of which 19 of them are endemic to the country. Considered as one of the most biologically unique, undisturbed remnant of tropical rainforest in Sri Lanka, Singharaja Rainforest Reserve is home for most such endemic herpetofauna. Agamid lizards play a key role in maintaining the balance in natural ecosystems. Hence, they are considered as good models in community ecological studies. They show various interactions within the same species and among different species, resulting in promoting diversity enrichment and ecological variations. For our study, we considered the following 4 endemic agamid lizard species: Lyriocephalus cutatus, Ceratophora aspera, Autocryptis weigmani, and Calotus lyoletis. Let us see why this research is important. Reptiles are known to have narrow ranges of distributions and niche requirements, and therefore they are more susceptible to threats due to habitat degradations compared to that of birds and mammals. Sri Lanka, even though considered as a herpetofaunal paradise, most of the species are still facing a risk of extinction. Therefore, it is necessary to quantify the degree of overlap in the use of resources by these species, and to determine habitats which need proper conservation and the resources that need to be plentiful in order to avoid disproportionate use to their availability. Studies on lizard assemblages on resource partitioning in tropical rainforests in the world have been carried out during the past decade. However, no similar studies have been published for resource partitioning among agamid lizard species in forests in Sri Lanka. And there is only one available previous study on habitat association of these endemic agamid species within SFR, which had been carried out in 2005. Therefore, in this research, our objectives were to investigate the spatial niche partitioning and quantify the degree of overlap in the use of microhabitats by endemic species of family Agamidae within SFR, and in turn to propose management implications based on the information gathered to conserve agamid species within SFR and forest habitats with similar microhabitat availability. The research spanned from January 2020 to March 2021, spending 410 person-hours within unlocked and selectively logged habitats of lowland and submountain forest types of SFR. The map illustrates the Singaraj National Heritage Wilderness Area and the extended forest boundaries. And these are some of the photographs of the habitats that we chose in our research. We followed visual encounter survey traversing transects of 200 meters in length and of varying angles. We made observations within a width of 1.5 meters towards either sides and up to a height of 3 meters above the ground. All transects were surveyed from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. of the day, allocating equal sampling effort for each transect. We maintained low speed in order to minimize the disturbances to the species. 1 meter into 1 meter area quadrants were used to determine the microhabitat variables or the spatial resources. Standardized equipment and taxonomic field keys were utilized to support the study. At each occupied quadrant, when a study species was observed, the perch plant diameter, perch height, and leaf litter depth were recorded as spatial resources. In order to statistically analyze the data and graphically represent the results, Minitab version 17 and Microsoft Excel 2016 were used. The niche breadth of each species was computed using Shannon-Wiener measure, and the spatial niche overlap was computed using Pianka's index. In this photograph, you can see a Lyriocephalus cutatus and an Otocryptis weigmani utilizing different perches within the same microhabitat. The perch diameter utilized by agamid species when sharing spatial resources were recorded and classified for better understanding. Similarly, the perch height utilized by each of these agamid species when they were sharing the same spatial resources and the leaf litter depth that they utilized when sharing spatial resources were recorded and classified. The highest Shannon-Wiener measure of niche breadth was computed for L. scutatus, which was at 0.74. The Pianka's index for the spatial niche overlap gave the highest value between L. scutatus and that of Calotus lyolepis, followed by the value between Ceratophora aspera and Calotus lyolepis, and that between L. scutatus and Otocryptis weigmani. All in all, we can conclude that all species that we studied are habitat specialists along the spatial resource dimension with niche breadth narrower than 1.5. Spatial niches of L. scutatus overlap to a considerable degree with that of Calotus lyolepis and Otocryptis weigmani, leading to a competition of resources. This is mainly because they occupy similar perch heights. However, Otocryptis weigmani often was found using leaf litter as their main perch type and only occasionally perch on trees in comparison to L. scutatus, on the other hand, who was a semi-arboreal species. Calotus lyolepis minimized overall competition by feeding on mostly arboreal lands, which is a diet different to that of L. scutatus. The niche breadth of utilized leaf litter depth of L. scutatus and Otocryptis weigmani are more closely related. However, L. scutatus occupied leaf litter only for feeding and escape behaviors, while Otocryptis weigmani utilized leaf litter as their main preferred perch type. Therefore, it is evident that these species ensure coexistence via other dimensions of resources, which is why niche modeling studies of spatial, temporal, and foraging niche partitioning is recommended to further confirm this coexistence. The present study provides updated information pertaining to interspecific competition levels and the suitability of the habitats available. It should be ensured that the distance between these habitat patches are maintained lesser than the species dispersal ranges in order to support immigration and colonization success. Further research recommended to carry out population viability analysis that will help predict extinction threshold. The information gathered from this present study and such population studies will ensure a holistic approach for monitored species management and conservation of habitats. These are some of the references that we used in our research. We would like to extend our gratitude to the staff of Department of Zoology of University of Sri Jawadanapura, the Singharaja Forest Reserve, Department of Forest Conservation, and the Department of Wildlife Conservation for granting permission and extending immense support and coordination towards the successful completion of this research. Thank you for listening and hope you have a good day.
Yes, thank you, Ms. Mendis, for that interesting presentation. Now the topic is open for discussion. Do we have any questions from the audience? Yes, Ms. Min. So, what are the practical and management implications of your study?
Yes, sir. So since most of these the endemic species that I considered were found within the marginal and the the selective habitats, currently there is a dire need of conservation plans that needs to be implemented, because there are, since it's a man and biosphere reserve as well, there are certain activities that are currently taking place in the marginal land, but also being extended towards the forest boundaries. So it affects the habitats of these species. So that is one need, and also when considering the unlocked habitats, it mainly affects the juvenile stages of these endemic species. So not only the marginal ones, but also the entire habitat has to be managed in order to properly maintain these the ranges, the niche beds, and the ranges that they require.
Right, thank you. Since there are no other questions for Ms. Mendis, thank you very much. We can move on to the next presentation.
Thank you, sir.
So the next presentation topic is hepatotoxicity of microcystine LR in Vista rats, which will be presented by HASN Abesiri. So I think, yes, we have the presentation here. So please, over to you, Ms. Abesiri.
Hepatotoxicity of microcystine LR in Vista rats. I'm HASN Abesiri, Center for Water Quality and Algae Research, University of Sri Jawadanapura. This is the outline of the presentation. Moving forward to the introduction. Cyanobacteria. Cyanobacteria are most primitive chlorophyll A containing prokaryotes. About 2,000 species belonging to 150 genera have been reported. 40 species are found to be toxigenic. In this study, we focused on microcystis species. Cyanobacterial toxins can be classified according to their mode of action: hepatotoxin, neurotoxin, nephrotoxin, and skin irritants. The commonest cyanotoxins are hepatotoxic microcystins. This is the gender structure of microcystine. These cyanotoxins can be accumulated through the consumption of contaminated water. Therefore, it can be created health risk to humans and animals. Therefore, WHO established a guideline for microcystine LR in drinking water as 1 microgram per liter, and tolerable daily intake value is 0.04 microgram per kilogram body weight per day. Significance of the study. MCLR is one of the most widespread cyanotoxin in the freshwater bodies of Sri Lanka. MCLR can be accumulated to the consumption of contaminated drinking water. Therefore, it can be created health problems to humans and animals. In our knowledge, limited studies have been recorded in relation to in vivo toxicity studies of MCLR in Sri Lanka. Therefore, Vista-Rat model was carried out to find out the effect of microcystin LR on liver. Objective of the study to determine the effects of microcystin LR on liver via exposure to microcystin LR contaminated water. Moving forward to the materials and methods. 35 Vista rats were randomly divided into 5 groups, including 4 treated groups and control group. Control group rats are orally treated with distilled water. Treated group rats are orally treated with 3 concentrations of MCLR at daily dose of 1 milliliter per 100 gram for 90 days. One group in treated group rats are treated with environmental water sample which contaminated with only microcystin LR. Blood samples from each individuals were collected at 0, 7, 14, 28, 42, 60 and 90 days intervals. Collected blood samples are subjected to AST and ALT levels. The liver samples of sacrificed rats were subjected to histopathological study. Moving forward to the most important part, results and discussion. The mean body weight of 5 groups, including control group, were gradually increased up to the 12th week, and after that it was decreased up to 14th week. The difference between mean body weight of treated groups and control group were not significant up to 12th week, and it was significant at 13th and 14th weeks. Livers of rats are subjected to absolute and relative weight reduction when compared with the control. The difference between treated groups and control group was statistically significant. When compared with the control, liver enzymes S and ALT levels have risen, and this makes it clear that liver damages are possible due to consumption of microcystin LR contaminated water. The difference between treated groups and control group was statistically significant for AST and ALT levels. The microscopic evaluation of liver lesions related to MCLR exposure was summarized in this table. In the liver, considered histopathological features are hepatocyte ballooning, variable inflammation, hepatocyte cell death, accumulation of pigment, hepatocyte regeneration, Cooper cells hyperplasia, nuclear pyknosis, and hemorrhage. All histopathological features are normal in liver of control group. The hepatocyte showed mild changes including sinusoidal congestion and vascular congestion with lobular inflammation, focal hemorrhage and marked microvesicular steatosis in HW group. Mild lobular inflammation, focal hemorrhage, perivenular inflammation, prominent Cooper cells, and focal microvesicular steatosis were observed in EN group. Mild lobular inflammation was seen in rats exposed to the WHO recommended dose of MCLR. Conclusions. Microcystin LR is the one of the most important toxin, which is the effect on liver. Decreased in relative and absolute body weight of liver. Increased levels of AST and ALT levels appear to indicate liver damage. Consumption of microcystin LR contaminated water for drinking purposes may lead to liver injury in animals with evident histopathological changes. These are my references. I would like to acknowledge National Research Council for the financial support and Center for Water Quality and Algae Research, University of Sri Jayawardenepura. Thank you, all of you.
Thank you, Ms. Abesiri. I think the topic, although it was listed under biodiversity conservation, I think it's more toxicology. Yeah, any questions from the audience?
Okay, my name is Tilak. This small question, because of my curiosity, did you collected microcystin contaminated water daily or stored in lab and feeded?
I collected, sir, season basely, dry and wet season.
Collect daily basis collected and feed.
No, sir, I collected water samples basically dry and wet seasons.
Then it's stored in under the laboratory condition and
Yes,
used
sir.
for the
Yes.
experiment.
Yes.
So during the storage, no changes to the water?
No, sir. We check the cyanotoxin MCLR concentrations in daily. They didn't change when we storage in -20 freezer. Then didn't change.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the explanation.
Okay, sir.
Yes. Do we have any other questions for the presenter? Right. It appears that there are no other questions. So thank you, Ms. Abesiri, once again for sharing your research findings in this session. We can move on to the next presentation. It's on environmental and security issues posed by marine ecosystems, which will be presented by PKBI Premaratne. So over to you.
Very good morning to all of you. My research topic is environmental and security issues posed by marine tourism to Sri Lankan's marine ecosystems. My name is Ismail. I'm from the University of Kalani, Sri Lanka. These are my content: introduction, research objectives, research questions, research methodologies, research finding and discussion, conclusion, and references. Introduction: Sri Lanka is a small island in the Indian Oceans of Asia and Pacific. The marine environment has long been one of the most attractive settings for tourism and relations. The concept of maritime tourism compares all tourist activities relating to the sea and the coastline. The scientific literature on the sustainabilities and publishes numerous reports on the socio-economic and environmental effect of environmental change and adaptation, including such changes in marine and coastal contents. Research objective is the purpose of this studies is to study the environment and security issues posed by the marine tourism industries to the marine ecosystem of Sri Lanka. And research problem: the problem with the studies is what are the environmental and security issues posed by the marine tourism industry to Sri Lanka's marine ecosystem. And also research methodology. Qualitative methodology was used to find this research, and secondary data sources were also used. The research work was carried out by analyzing the literature sources in the multiple ways, and also of the finding and discussion. The many small hotels continue to discharge their water wastewater on the shore or into the sea without treating it. Tourism starts in Hikkadua because of this coral reefs. I mainly focus on Hikkadua area. About 45 hectares of coral areas was declared a marine sanctuaries in 1979, which was later converted to marine park and then nature reserves. Today, many glass boats play in these areas to show tourists that very corals. The boats are run by locals and monitored by the worldwide wildlife departments, but is gradually become problematic when they lost count of the number of boats, and this is boats touch and damage to of the corals. And also, Hikaru say that another factor affecting coral is the poor quality of water because of pollution. Hikaru witnesses problem of influence and water disposals in the past, and also. What are the whatever the positive impact on economic and conservation of environment, tourism will have the same amount of negative impact. Coastal tourism has socio-environmental related negative impact in the studies area. Foreign and the domestic tourists both visit to the Pasikuda tourism site. Tourism related to physical change and environmental alterations are very common for wide range of tourism infrastructures. The physical environment is beginning collapsed due to the massive number of tourist arrivals. Minor physical alterations impact including sand removal, destructions of mangroves and the pond, damage the coral reefs and the seagrass bed, which help fish breeding. Environment and the surrounding get changed because of this rapid developments. So loss of biodiversity and loss of migrate species are the major ecological problems. Hence, removes native peoples from this site, altering their way of life and changing them of different jobs and life seems to be a social issues in this area. And also coastal of different jobs and life seems to be a have social issues in this area. And also coastal areas, particularly because of the areas with the fraying rivers have become important locations for the tourism developments. So the majority of hotels along the coastline have been constructed without proper planning and result in numerous problems such as liquid and soil waste disposals have become major issues in some locations such as in Hikadu. These issues have become active and it has now to have an adverse impact on the marine environment. So dumping of garbage into city waters and into the beaches have the negative impact on this marine environment in general, and on this refers to particularly the in addition, under industrial influence is such discharges directly into rivers to canals that eventually pollute the sea. And a conclusion of the research and tourism at another layer of challenges to our marine environment and its rapid global growth means those challenges have multiple dramatically over the past few years. Tourists' impact on this marine environment, examine the trends in details, address questions such as a critical assessment of these crisis ships sectors impact on the marine environment and coastal destinations visited by the KQ ships. The impact of tourism on oceans was and plastics by the directional relationship between climate change and global warming and marine environments and coastal tourist destinations, impact of recreational activities such as diving and offshore fishing on the marine environment, including coral reef. The consumptions of marine resources to meet the tourist demand for product of the sea and showing that improves the ocean's resources. Natural and man-made disasters that have their origins in the oceans, but if affect coastal tourist destinations. The challenges of marine tourism planning and management, as well as the impact of the constructions of new resorts and tourism infrastructures. The questions of whether regulations is necessary to control the impact of tourism on our oceans, is the whether industrial self-regulations in the best solutions according to the all the studies factors. The maritime tourism industries in Sri Lanka has a number of irregular problems. This seems to have the impact on maritime security and this ecosystem as well. My presentation is over. These are my references. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Premaratna. Do you have any questions for Mr. Premaratna on his research topic? Yeah, so Mr. Premaratna, so you mainly discuss about various environmental related issues due to coastal tourism, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so in your research, what was the exact methodology you used? So is it just based on literature, or what's the research method you used?
Yes, I mainly focus on as a research methodology is a survey method for the data collections and.
So who are the people you interviewed or surveyed? Mr. Premaratna, are you still there? I think it appears that Mr. Premaratna is not in the meeting, maybe due to a technical fault. Do we have any other questions for? I think we cannot take any more questions since the presenter is not available. Right. So in that case, so if he comes back, we will keep some questions at the end of the session. So let's move on to the next presentation, which is on nature tourism and neighborhood sustainability in resident perspective. That is done by G.O.I. Senaratna.
Everyone, I am Osiri Senaratna and going to present my research abstract on the topic of nature tourism and neighborhood sustainability in residents' perspective, case study in Nimurbe Divisional Secretariat Division, Barampoda. This is the content of my presentation. When moving to the background of the study, there are many types of tourism and nature-based tourism is one of them. With the arrival of tourists, they need resources, particularly energy, land, water, and others. Residents of that area also need these resources for their day-to-day activities. This situation will create many problems in residents' point of view. According to previous researchers, it is identified that there can be seen three major types of effects in the places with tourists visit. They are environmental effects, economic effects, and socio-cultural effects. Within the sustainability paradigm, this research is trying to identify the hotspot area of nature tourism, effects of nature tourism, and how they affect to the residents within Ingulpet Divisional Secretariat Division in Ratnapura district. Residents' attitude related to nature tourism are strengthened by their experience and have strong links with their values and personality. Therefore, in this study, resident satisfaction will examine within the effects of nature tourism. When moving to the research problem, understanding residents' perspective is complicated because opinions toward nature tourism are formed from residents' perception of many factors. When a place is able to attract more people, that place will become a hotspot of tourism industry. As more and more people come to the area, they need accommodations and other facilities. People then recognize this situation as an opportunity to increase their income level and they tend to build more buildings for hotels, cafes, and other needed facilities. This situation will change economic, environmental, socio-cultural situations within the area. Therefore, this research developed the research program as what is the hotspot area of nature tourism, what are the changes that nature tourism creates in the area and its effect for the residents of that area. By answering above research questions, following research objectives are going to be achieved. The first objective is to identify the hotspot area of nature tourism in Ingulpet Divisional Secretariat Division. Next, to identify the socio-economic and cultural effects of nature tourism within the selected area. When reviewing the literature, it is identified that there can be seen three major types of effects in places with tourist visit. These major effects are environmental effects, economic effects, and socio-cultural effects. The quality of environment, both natural and man-made, is essential to tourism. However, the relationship of tourism with the environment is complex. This is the prism of sustainability. When moving to the methodology, the target population of the research study is residents in Ingulpet Divisional Secretariat Division. Sample is residents near to 6 main tourist attraction places within the Ingulpet Divisional Secretariat Division. The 6 places are Pantudawa Waterfall, Surathadi Ala, Non-Peril Estate, Havagala, Demali Ala, and Adia Batum Ala. Questionnaire survey is employed from 122 respondents to collect data on resident satisfaction on effects of nature-based tourism. Questionnaire was designed according to the Likert scale. This is the conceptual framework. This is the result of data analysis to identify the hotspot area of nature tourism in Ingulpet Divisional Secretariat Division. When moving to the conclusion, in the research objectives point of view, results reveal that the Pantudawa waterfall is the most visited destination within the Ingulpet Divisional Secretariat Division, and 45.9% respondents say that the number of tourists visit to the waterfall is vary between 300 to 400 per month. This is some preferences of my research. Finally, thank you for listening.
Right. Thank you, Ms. Senaratna. So you mainly interviewed local people in your research, right?
Yes.
So what were the main outcomes of your research? Because in the conclusion, I saw only that Pahantudao is the most visited
Yes, in my full
destination.
research, in my full research, I used two objectives. One was to identify the hotspot area within the Gulf Edition and Secretary Edition. Second one was to identify the socio-economic and environmental effects that the residents face due to nature tourism. Then that result was revealed that people satisfied with economic effects, but they don't satisfy with social and cultural effects and environmental effects. According to the result, they said that the environmental impact was very bad. Likewise.
Yeah, do you have any, how did you measure that? Was it just qualitative based study, or did you ask them to rate the level of impact in a Likert scale?
Yeah, by questionnaire, I rate in Likert scale. That's what I analyze by using SPSS software. This research is mixed method research. For this presentation only, I use first objective.
So to identify the hotspots.
Yeah.
May I ask a question?
Yes.
I am Shireen Amendra. Thank you for the presentation. However, how do you identify hotspot? Because there appear to be two definitions. One is the popularity, and the other is the, if you say biodiversity hotspot, it means the threat to that location through damage. So how do you identify hotspot?
By using questionnaire, I ask the residents from that area how many people come for that area nearly for a month.
So I take it is you have identified it by popularity.
Yeah.
If you look at biodiversity hotspot, the definition is slightly different. It means that 75% of the endemicity is lost, and that is what defines a hotspot. I suggest that you would look at carrying capacity of a site, and then you can set policy. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, do we have any other questions for Ms. Senaratne? Right, in that case, I think we can move on to the next presentation. So thank you, Ms. Senaratne, again for presenting your research findings. Okay. We will move on to the next presentation, which is the title is Towards a Resilient Ecotourism Destination. Assessment of the Alla Urban Development Plan 2021 to 2030, which will be presented by MAMT Veerasinghe. Over to you.
Hello everyone, I am MAMT Veerasinghe. My presentation for today's symposium is entitled Towards a Resilient Ecotourism Destination, Assessment of the Alla Urban Development Plan 2021 to 2030. So let me first give you a brief introduction to the tourism significance of Alla. Alla is a popular ecotourism destination that is centrally located in the hills, connecting with other tourism destinations of the country through both road and rail. The room occupancy rate of Alla is also the highest in the country, which is 75.24%. The 2019 visitation of Alla was at 120,000 tourists, and this number is expected to reach 2 million by 2030. Almost all residents of Alla depend on the tourism industry for their economic well-being. Now, Allah has reached this current state of popularity during the last 2 decades or so, and that was also through organic means with very little government intervention. Now, as you can see on the maps displayed on the screen, the map on the left-hand side shows the main visitor destinations before the year 2000. And those destinations were limited to the southern coast, national parks, the cultural triangle, and the hill country. But after the year 2000, and especially after the end of the civil conflict, tourism started to emerge in various parts of the country, including in Allah. The Allah Urban Development Plan 2021 to 2030 was created to give better development direction, which was so far inadequate. Its main goals are: 1, to make Allah the most attractive and safest cities in the hills, and 2, to develop the social, economic, and physical income generating infrastructure. Now, as mentioned before, in Allah, almost the entire economy is dependent on the tourism industry. In such a scenario, it is important to ensure the resilience of the tourism industry in face of adversity that natural disasters may bring. Literature has shown how destinations that have disaster risk reduction strategies, or we call them DRR strategies in short, how these destinations are more resilient to natural disasters. And these DRR strategies also help to reduce tourism-induced stress on both the society and the environment. Creating a safe destination, which was mentioned as being one of the goals of the plan, has a connection with reducing the effects of natural disasters. So in that context, the research objective of this study was to assess the extent to which the plan considered DRR strategies towards a resilient tourism industry. In order to do so, a qualitative methodology was adopted. 2 key elements of DRR, which are hazard identification and vulnerability reduction, were chosen as the assessment criteria. The 5 main components of the plan, which are background study, need of the plan, goals and objectives, SWOT analysis, and the action plan, were assessed against these criteria. So moving on to the findings, considering the first criteria of hazard identification, the plan had identified landslides as the only hazard affecting Allah. The Disaster Management Center, however, reports multiple hazards affecting the area. Those multiple hazards being lightning, landslides, cyclones, and high winds. An accurate hazard identification is an important aspect in DRR to take up activities such as zoning and land subdivision, and also it actually sets the tone for the rest of the DRR activities as well. Moving on to the second criteria of vulnerability reduction. Sometimes in the tourism industry, economical vulnerability can take precedence over ecological vulnerability. However, for an ecotourism destination, what must be understood is that ecological resilience is what ensures economical resilience. In this particular plan, however, ecological vulnerability has been addressed, and reduction measures, rather vulnerability reduction measures, have also been proposed. Moving on to the second component, which is economical vulnerability, one of the main problems highlighted in the plan was encroachment to naturally sensitive areas. The plan has addressed this from the surface, that is through zoning. What the plan has failed to identify is the underlying connection that encroachment may have with economical vulnerability. Moving on to social vulnerability, vulnerability reduction measures were absent despite 18% of the female-headed households and 17% of the female involvement in the tourism industry. It must be noted that socially vulnerable groups such as females are often unfairly treated and affected both during and after a disaster. And when you consider post-disaster recovery efforts, female engagement is very rarely seen. So their employment opportunities are either permanently lost or they are put on hold after a disaster until such time the destination recovers. When it comes to physical vulnerability, the more economically desirable projects and local area beautification projects have taken precedence over projects aimed at physical vulnerability reduction. In fact, one of the earlier versions of the plan, which is the 2019 to 2030 plan, had at least a separate project which addressed the building of retention walls on the highly landslide prone Allavallavai Road. However, the newer version of the plan, which is what is being assessed right now, had no mention of such a project. The Allavallavai Road is one of the most important gateways. Rather, it's actually one of the main gateways to the city, and over 90% of the tourism service providers are also located here. To date, this road is landslide prone, and the closest physical vulnerability reduction measure taken up in the plan is to develop the Halpe Road to take pressure off the Allavallavai Road. But when you consider the prioritization of the Halpe Road development project against the other projects, the Halpe Road development project is ranked 9th, and other projects such as walking track development projects and sanitary facility development projects at tourism attractions and vehicle park development projects have preceded it. Creating a safe destination is the main goal of the plan, but the physical vulnerability reduction measures that ensure the creation of this safe destination are not prioritized. Therefore, it is recommended to amend the plan or to pass separate bylaws by the local authority to incorporate a comprehensive hazard identification and to integrate social, economic and physical vulnerability reduction measures. So here's a short list of references that helped me with this study. So that wraps up my presentation. I would like to thank all the attendees for your attention, the Symposium Organizing Committee for this valuable opportunity, and to everyone else who helped me get this far. Thank you very much.
Right. Thank you, Ms. Veerasinghe, for that interesting presentation. Now we can take up questions. Do we have any questions from the audience to Ms. Veerasinghe? Yes, so in this study, you basically analyzed the Alla Urban Development Plan in terms of social, economic, and environmental perspectives, right?
It was analyzed from the context of how the plan addressed the disaster, to ensuring the disaster resilience of the destination in from the social, economic, environmental perspective, as you said. So, yes.
Yes. So now when you are talking about the resilience, has this plan talked about the carrying capacity of this destination?
No, it doesn't. Ecological vulnerability is addressed in basically all components of the plan. However, carrying capacity, mentioning of the at least the word carrying capacity was not found.
Yes. So what's your idea about it? I mean, now when you're talking about the resilience of a destination, we should have an idea of social carrying capacity at least. So do you have any idea of, in your analysis, did you consider about that?
It wasn't considered, sir.
Right, then, so this plan is for 2021 and up to 2030, right?
Yes.
So you are talking about the vulnerability to natural disasters. Now we are facing this COVID-19 pandemic. So, so in such unexpected contexts, like global pandemics, how you talk about the resilience of this destination? Because we have to now when you're talking about building a more resilient destination, you have to think about these new developments as well, right?
Yes. So my research was mainly based on natural disasters. Yes, like you said, it is very important to address these health disasters as well. I didn't quite get your question, sir.
Now, when you're talking about building a more resilient destination,
yes,
we have to think about these pandemics like COVID-19, right? Because it can affect the entire tourism industry. So,
yes,
some strategies to face those kind of global pandemics or disasters should be discussed. So that was my question, basically. So in your policy, in your analysis, did you consider about that, or you just?
No, not in this particular analysis. I didn't, because it was mainly related to natural disasters, meaning things like landslides, lightning, high winds, which mainly affect the area. I did not consider health disasters or any man-made disasters.
Right. In your perspective, do you think Allah is subjected to over-tourism?
In my perspective, yes, over-tourism, mainly because of the fact that it has not had a planned development. It so far it has been organically developed, which is good, but again, in my perspective, yes, it has undergone over-tourism.
Yeah. Again, I think to address or ask that question, whether it is subjected to over-tourism or not, you again have to consider about the carrying capacity. So I think maybe in your analysis, those are the areas you can look forward to improving. Yes.
Sure.
So,
thank you.
Dr. Peter, is there time for another question?
Yes, please.
Yes. May I ask Ms. Veerasinghe whether she did not present, although she spoke of it, the economic return on this project. I'm aware of the project and have commented on it, but she said about the only economy for Ella was tourism. But I think a graph, perhaps, do you have a graph which might show your sources of economy in the Ella region?
Ma'am, so my findings showed that more than 90% of the residents depend on tourism, and the rest basically take up agriculture. Unfortunately, I do not have a graph to display right now.
Yes, thank you. But my suggestion is to promote Ella not as a destination, but as a throughway.
Okay.
So I have been, I'm aware via the UDA of the project. Thank you very much. I think you should carry it to them back again, your findings.
Sure. Thank you.
Right. So
thank you, Doctor.
Thank you. So I think thank you, Ms. Veerasinghe, again for your explanations and sharing your research findings with us in this forum. So let's move on to the next presentation, which is on catch diversity of small-scale lobster fishery in southern coast of Sri Lanka, which will be presented by Hewa Patrana, SK Hewa Patrana. Over to you.
Good morning. I am Sudhira from Faculty of Agricultural Sciences, Sabaragamu University of Sri Lanka. Today I am going to show of my research findings with you and interesting topics on catch diversity of small-scale lobster fishery in southern coast of Sri Lanka. These are my contents of the presentation. And before the digging into my research, I need to give some idea about the lobster fishery. Lobster fishery is one of the major artisanal fishery in southern coast area, and lobster fishery can divide it into two major sectors: capture fishery and culture fishery. Culture fishery is based with artificial and special environment. Capture fishery is the most popular way in the Sri Lanka, and lobsters have very high value of nutrition than other poultry and other food items, such as they have low calories, low saturated fatty acids, and low cholesterol levels, and high value of proteins and minerals and other vitamins. So in that case, lobster fishery has a very high value of commercial value in Sri Lankan local market and foreign markets. In that case, lobster fishery tend to overexploitation through catching undersized lobsters and ecosystem degradation while capturing the lobster, because some of fishermen used illegal and unregulated fishing gears to capture lobsters, and catching lobster with bearing eggs and tar spots. It's a very huge problem in nowadays. It's illegal and poor management practices used to conservation of the lobsters is a big problem. This plate shows what are the spiny lobster species collected from the southern coast of Sri Lanka. First one shows Panulirus penicillatus, called variegated spiny lobster. Second one called Panulirus versicolor, called painted spiny lobster. Third one called Panulirus homarus, called scalloped spiny lobster. Fourth one called Panulirus ornatus, called ornate spiny lobster. Fifth one called Panulirus longipus, called Japanese spiny lobsters. These are my objectives of the research: to identify the vulnerability of the lobster species, gender and sexual maturity composition of the lobster catch along the southern coast of Sri Lanka. Then we move to methodology part of my research. The field data collected from 10 different lobster land sites along the southern coast of Sri Lanka during the 2019 and 2020. The field data such as type of fish species, we described about that in the previous slides, and gender, presence or absence of eggs, and presence or absence of tar spots. When consider about the tar spots occur in a female lobster in their spawning periods. Under the carapace between the back legs, that area can attach sperms during the mating period. Then spawning time fertilize eggs in that area. Firstly, we have collected data from separated data sheets and then converted that data into Microsoft Excel worksheets, Microsoft Excel spreadsheets. Then we analyze this data through descriptive statistical method using Minitab software. This is the location site we have collected data. You can see there are 10 different landing sites in here. Then we move to result and discussion parts of my research. In 2019, the dominant species the dominant species was Panulirus homarus with average percentage of 73.16%, and the least abundant species is a Panulirus ornatus species. Average percentage was 0.74%. In 2020, is the same here, and the dominant species was Panulirus homarus, and the least abundant species was Panulirus ornatus. Then we move to how to sex ratio change with their species in both years. This result reveals the male to female sex ratio nearly come to 1:1. You can see the both years came to 1:1. This is the most important part in my research result part. You can see in yellow bar and blue bar. Yellow bar occur in 43.01% in 2019 and 37.31% in 2020 percentage were identified born eggs, and blue bar indicates 48.53% in 2019 and 47.03% in 2020 percentage of females were identified with their task force. These are my conclusions. Previously, we have said Panvirus homarus is the most dominant species, and Panvirus ornatus is the least abundant species in both years. The sex ratio reveals the male to female with near to 1:1 in both years, and the major cause of lobster depletion cause lobster catch with spots and egg bearing. These are the recommendations based in my research to strengthening the implementation of available regulations need to get. These are my acknowledgements and preferences. And finally, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Heva Patrana. Now the topic is open for discussion. Do we have any questions from the audience for Ms. Heva Patrana? Yes, so in your conclusions, I think you observed the main, the sex ratio of the catch is almost 1:1, right? Yeah, so do you see any threats for the future populations of lobsters due to harvesting?
Yes, sir, because in one thing, in Hambantota district, I have seen 300% fishing, but 10%, only 10% have license. That is a big problem to lobster exploitation and task spots and many of capture has task spots and eggs bearing species. That's the huge problem for overexploitation of that species.
So what are the current regulations to prevent such overexploitations?
License method is the main thing, sir, but it's need to new policies and regulations, sir. License is not enough and need some of fishermen going to at night time to capture these lobsters. So need to new regulations and new laws to conserve that species.
So in your opinion, what sort of new regulations should be introduced?
Need to update and new license method need to that and need to some quoted method and other to legal sizes updated for capturing these species. Need to that type regulations, sir.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any other questions?
Thank you.
Right, so in the absence of any other questions, we can move to the next presentation. So thank you, Miss. Yeah, so we can move on to the next presentation. The title is Assessment of Benthic Substrate Categories of Bandarang Reef in the Current Scenario, which will be presented by HGCR Surya Bandar. Over to you.
Hello everyone, my name is Chanaka Surya Bandar and my presentation topic is Assessment of Benthic Substrate Categories of Bandarang Reef in the Current Scenario. So these are the contents of my presentation. Bandarang Coral Reef is a well-known coral reef in the southern coast of Sri Lanka. This coral reef has been providing a lot of ecosystem services to the adjacent coastal communities. But nowadays, this coral reef has been critically degraded due to both anthropogenic and natural disturbances. Past literature suggested that the major anthropogenic stresses that causes to degradation of this coral reef as the illegal coral mining. So this coral reef needed to be preserved. So sound management plans is based on reef-related baseline data. We have recorded the lack of this reef-related baseline data regarding the Bandarang Reef. Also, we have recorded the data deficiency of the Bandarang Reef area after 2014 to 2016 El Nino event. So this study was conducted to generate those baseline data. As for the objectives of this research, to determine benthic diversities in the Bandarang Reef, to determine respective fish diversities and abundances, to identify modern issues concerning the reef and suggest suitable solutions. So this is the Bandarang Reef area. It was located in down south Sri Lanka. Data collection part was mainly consisted with two parts. First one is Benthic Diversity Survey. It was done by line intercept transect method. Second one is Reef Fish Diversity Survey. It was done by underwater belt transect method. So the collected data was analyzed using two equations. For the benthic cover, it was used this equation. For reef fish, this equation was used. We have recorded the main substrate covering categories as algae, bleach coral, dead coral, invertebrates, live hard corals, rocks, rubbles, and sand. Among them, dead coral had the dominant cover. Moving into the coral, we have recorded 17 live hard coral species throughout our survey. From them, Poecilophora damiconis had the highest abundances, and we have recorded as the highest growth form among those corals that corals belongs to as massive coral growth form. In reef fish diversity survey, we have encountered 24 families of reef fishes. Among them, 4 families of fishes, reef fishes, had the highest abundances. Those are Acanthuridae, Chaetodontidae, Lebridae, and Pomicanthuridae. So this graph is indicating the potential anthropogenic stresses within 1 kilometer radius to the reef. So we have recorded as the main anthropogenic stresses to the reef as inputs from agricultural lands, inputs from canals and runoffs, inputs from hotels and restaurants, inputs from factories, board damages, and freshwater runoffs. Compared to the past condition, the deep intact Bandarang Reef has turned into patchy reef boulders. Poecilophora damiconis was recorded as the highest benthic covering coral species. In 2008, Arjun stated that Poecilophora is contributing to reef recovery in southern coast of Sri Lanka. So this study was proven that the dominant growth form of the corals was massive. Massive corals has the higher capability to endure stresses. As Bandarang Reef coral is most of the Bandarang Reef corals belong to massive growth form, we can say that Bandarang Reef in promising recovery stage. So as the major anthropogenic stresses, we have identified coastal pollution, boat damage, wastewater seepages, and sedimentation. We also recorded the reef smothering, especially by this Halimida species. And Bandarang Reef area is associated with high wave action, also rubble cover. Combination of these two can cause a mechanical damage to live hard corals. As for the conclusions, Bandarang Reef area is in threatened status. Although the anthropogenic stresses has been lessened recently, mainly due to COVID pandemic, the reef recovery seems quite dull. So, initiation of better management strategies based on reef baseline data is needed to improve future recovery of this Bandarang Reef. As the future recommendation, comprehensive water quality parameter monitoring and chemical analysis is needed regarding this reef. This study was mainly conducted in non-monsoonal period in southern coast of Sri Lanka. So conducting the same research in monsoonal period also is needed. So this is the reef plantation area in the Bandarang Reef, Bandarang, and it is adjacent to the Bandarang Reef. I think further monitoring and studies regarding this reef plantation area is needed. So I'd like to thank my research supervisors and my friends to helping collect data and other stuff. And I owe my gratitude to all the academics and non-academics of the Faculty of Fisheries and Marine Sciences and Technology. Finally, I would like to thank my family to encourage me to do this research. So these are the references that I used for preparing this presentation. And thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Surya Bandara, for that interesting presentation. So now we can have questions from the audience. Yes, I have a little clarification.
Yes.
So in your study, you identified major anthropogenic impacts. So on what
Yes.
basis you have, what methods you have used to identify those?
Yes, basically I have used the visual observation, and I have used the Google map for identification. Before to go to the field, I have drafted all the anthropogenic stresses using the Google map. I have identified all the hotels, restaurant, freshwater runoffs, and all other things. And then when I go to the field, I observed those in personally, and I located those, and that's how I identified those things.
You didn't make any, quantitative assessments on the sediments or chemicals in the water quality, etc. in your study, right?
No, sir. I only did the benthic assessment and a reef fish dice assessment, and I qualitatively assess those stresses.
Right. So you talked about the damages by boats. Is it by fisheries or
yes,
going diving?
Now the diving and snorkeling is a bit reduced at the area because of the reef is mostly dead. So not a lot of tourists come into the reef, and the boat time, the fishery boat route is overlapping the reef area. So it is majorly driven by the fishery boats.
Right. So how is have they already started? Coral replanting in this area?
Yes, there are reef planting that was done by the NARA and MIPA, and it's not been monitored actually. So it's not very quite successful at the moment.
What's the reason for the failure? According to your opinion.
Yeah, I think because of the freshwater imports and the sedimentation, I have recorded a lot of TSS value in the reef area. So I think that can be the reason. And the planted corals are the Acropora formosa mostly. And in the natural reef, we had recorded as the major reef as the massive growth form, but the Acropora formosa is a branching coral growth form. So I think that can be also the reason. Also a reason.
Right. Thank you very much, Mr. Surya Bandar. So let's move on to the next presentation session. The topic is assessment of biodiversity and blue carbon in mangroves, seagrasses, salt marshes, and algae in Manna, northern Sri Lanka, which will be presented by YKDSS Senaratne.
My name is YKDSS Senaratne, and today I'm presenting our research on assessment of blue carbon stocks, including mangroves, seagrasses, salt marshes in selected locations in northern Sri Lanka. This is the outline of today's presentation. Blue carbon is the carbon stored in coastal and marine ecosystems. This study basically aims on blue carbon stored by mangroves, salt marshes, and seagrasses. Primary objective of this study is to assess the blue carbon stocks in selected locations in northern Sri Lanka. Specific objectives are to partition the biomass and organic carbon content between the plant components and the soil in blue carbon ecosystem studied, to compare the differences between mangroves, seagrasses, salt marshes in the distribution of biomass and organic carbon contents. Justification. Sri Lanka is positioned under top 10 countries which are most affected by the global climate change. Blue carbon ecosystems are now being recognized for their role in mitigating climate change. Forests contribute to absorb 28% of GHGs. Coastal ecosystems sequester and store about 4 to 5 times more carbon than terrestrial forests. But these ecosystems are not protected and are vulnerable to damage and degradation, and dearth of sufficient information on their ecosystem services and carbon contents. These are the previous literatures and the major findings. And these are the sampling locations. This graph shows the area of each site and the plant density of mangrove sites. Sampling of mangroves were done perpendicular to the waterline, and distance between plots varied with the location and the level of diversity. For mangrove trees which have DBH higher than 3 cm, measured in 7 meter radius circular plots, for DBH and height. For trees which have DBH lower than 3 cm, measured in 2 meter radius circular plot for DBH and height, and also counted. For new manifolds, the number of new manifolds were counted and samples were taken for the laboratory work. 3 soil samples were taken, each from 3 depth at 30 centimeter intervals from the center. And this is how we have done our sampling. In sampling of seagrass beds, 40 plots sampled, in total having 1 meter dimensions parallel to the seascape. Species identified, the total number in the plot counted, the percentage coverage, the seagrass in the plot observed, then the seagrass samples and soil samples were taken into the laboratory analysis. In salt marshes, 40 plots were sampled, number of plants in plots were counted, and then the plants of the plots were uprooted and taken for the laboratory analysis with the soil samples. This is how we done sampling for salt marshes. Then comes to assessment of the carbon in these ecosystems. So these have two components, vegetative carbon and soil carbon. First, let's look at soil carbon. First, the soil part density was calculated for each depth interval using a metric equation. Then the carbon combustion is calculated using the equation. Finally, with those two components, which are soil bulk density and carbon combustion, the total organic carbon in soil is measured. Then comes vegetative carbon in mangroves. This comprised above ground carbon, carbon stored in litter, new manifolds, and seedlings. So those components were calculated using allometric equation mentioned in the slide. Then comes to vegetative carbon in salt marshes. In this case, the carbon content, vegetative carbon content in salt marshes is equal to 35% of dry weight of salt marshes, and the vegetative carbon in seagrasses equals to 35% of dry weight. And then comes to results. These are the species we found in the sites, and these are the mangrove species found in the site. Then comes the results of mangroves. This graph shows the above ground organic carbon content, below ground organic carbon content in 3 mangrove sites, and the results showed that there was variation in above ground carbon among sites, but no variation between soil carbon. Total organic carbon content in Vegetative was recorded as 294 tons per hectare, while Punareen and Paliyaru were recorded as 344 tons per hectare and 357 tons per hectare respectively. When it comes to soil organic carbon content, a trend was identified that soil carbon content is decreased with the increase of depth. Total soil organic carbon in Vegetative recorded as about 537 tons per hectare, in Punareen 331 tons per hectare, and in Paliyaru 487 tons per hectare. Results for seagrass beds. According to this, total below ground carbon is very much high, and in Site 1 it was 595 tons per hectare, and Site 2 458 tons per hectare. Then comes the salt marshes. According to this, below ground carbon is very much high, and in Site 1 it was 286 tons per hectare, and the second site it was 310 tons per hectare. As a final outcome of the study, the total organic carbon content in mangrove ecosystem is about 800 tons per hectare. Seagrasses are about 528 tons per hectare, and salt marshes are about 200 tons per hectare. So these are my references. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Senaratne. Now we can have a few questions from the audience, if there are any. Do you have any questions from Ms. Senaratne? Yes, I think, yeah, in your study, did you quantify the blue carbon stock in algae as well?
Yes, sir. This project research is now going on research. So still I couldn't able to finalize that algae carbon stuff. That's why I didn't mention it in my study. This presentation.
In the vegetation, you considered both above ground and below ground.
Yes.
Right.
Sir. Yeah.
Okay. So in salt marshes, did you consider the soil, the carbon stock in soil as well?
Yes, sir. In salt marshes, the vegetative carbon is so low, and it is not that much contributing for the carbon storage. In there, the dominant thing is the soil. So soil contribute more to store carbon than vegetative carbon. So yeah, I calculated for both vegetative and soil carbon, and that was the result I get, that the soil contribute more to store carbon.
Right. Thank you. Do we have any other questions for Ms. Senaratne? In the absence of other questions, I think that's the last presentation for the session. I would like to thank all the presenters for choosing this forum to share your latest research findings. So we heard about, we had the opportunity to listen to 9 interesting presentations, mainly conducted by young researchers. So I congratulate all of you for your efforts, and I wish you all the success in your future research careers. And also the comments received in this forum, I think you can take them as constructive comments to further improve your research in the future. Right.
So now, till Professor Priyan Pereira provides us with the final evaluation, let's move on to the photography session. So for that, we request you all to switch on your videos for a while, if possible. We request you all to switch on your videos for a while to take some photographs and gives us a thumbs up. And if you all could give us a thumbs up, if possible. All right. Thank you very much for your cooperation.
Right. I think now it's the time to announce the best presenter winners of the session. So it was actually a very close call. We had 3 presentations which I have selected, which were equally good. But unfortunately, we have to select one winner for the session. We can't have 3 winners. So the best presentation was selected based upon the quality of the scientific information shared, and of course the presenter, how the contents were presented, and how the questions were answered during the Q&A session. So after a very close contest, I have selected the winner, that is YKDS Senaratna, who presented the topic assessment of biodiversity and blue carbon in mangroves, seagrasses, salt marshes, and algae in Mannar, northern Sri Lanka. So she's the winner. So let's. So my congratulations goes to Ms. Senaratna and the research team. So I wish them all the success in their future. I mean, to continue this research and come up with good findings. Right. With that, I think we can wrap up the session. Once again, on behalf of the organizing committee, I thank all the presenters for sharing your research findings in this forum. Thank you very much, and hope to see you all maybe in next year's symposium as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. So with that, we have come to the end of today's session. We extend our heartfelt gratitude to Professor Priyan Pereira for extending your immense support towards today's session. And also congratulations to the best presenter and all the presenters for joining hands with us. We wish you all the very best for all your future endeavors and for scientific research work. Have a good day. Thank you very much for joining.
Thank you very much. Have a good day, everyone.